Good afternoon, everyone. This is me, Dela Prasain, and thank you so much, NIICE, for providing me this platform to moderate the session on a most debatable issue at the current time, Millennium Challenge Corporation. And it's my honor to be here, and I would like to welcome all the panelists, distinguished participants, experts, scholars, and our Facebook audiences. And moving on to now, Millennium Challenge Corporation Compacts are the 5-year agreements through which the United States provides grants to partner countries to support programs to reduce poverty and generate increased income for the beneficiaries. And at one side, the headquarters of the United States Millennium Challenge Corporation has expressed concerns over the delay in parliamentary ratification of 500 million US dollar grant to Nepal, whereas at the other side, political parties, academicians, and scholars are divided over the ratification of the compact. And yes, since the inception, the MCC board has approved 37 compacts worth 13 billion US dollars. And of course, there are certain criteria for any country to be eligible to receive the grant. Nepal had met 16 out of the 20 indicators. And although it has been said that MCC is a part of the economic aid, there are many views from the political circle, politicians, experts, and scholars that it might be the part of Indo-Pacific strategy, and there has always been a question that why it need ratification from the parliament if it's only an economic aid. And so without any delay, I would like to proceed the session now. And we have 5 panelists today to discuss on this issue. I think Semanta Dahal is not here, as I'm informed. So I would like to call Mr. Dilli Paudel first. And Dilli Paudel is wait for a while. Well, he's a graduate from Tribhuvan University and pursuing a master degree in public administration and international relations and diplomacy. And currently is pursuing a master's degree in international university in Kyoto, Japan. And his research interest is on the role of small power in international politics. And he will be speaking on MCC and the construction of the threat perception in Nepal. So I would like to call Mr. Dilli Paudel. Well, Dilli, sir, are you here?
Yeah, ma'am, thank you. May I proceed?
Yes, you can proceed now.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Dela ma'am, for this opportunity. First of all, I would like to thank NIICE for this great opportunity. It is my great pleasure and privilege to share my ideas regarding the construction of threat perception in Nepal about the MCC. I have seen many distinguished seniors, my professors. I would like to say namaskar, first of all, to all of you and all the participants. In this presentation, my presentation will be in 2 parts. First, I will introduce my framework that will be suitable to explain the construction of threat perception in Nepal about the MCC, and then I will apply this framework, empirically apply this framework to study how the threat perception has been shaped and constructed or created in Nepal regarding the MCC. First of all, let me focus on some of the relevant questions. Among the critics of the MCC, there is differential sensitivity. If you listen to critics 1 of the MCC, the first critics analyze MCC from one perspective, and another person criticize MCC from another perspective. So why there is a lack of consensus even among the critics of MCC? This is the first question. Second, why does an individual, a person, or a politician on supports the MCC or on supporting the MCC oppose latter, and vice versa? That means on support and latter opposes it, and on opposes and latter supports it. Why? What kinds of social psychology is working behind this phenomena? And why is the MCC facing opposition, while other US assistants are being accepted without protest. As I have said, I will first introduce my framework and I will then go to the empirical analysis part. As argued by scholar Demuth, the old is mainly the old of perception, images and ideas that we have created. And study of the old means studies of the such perceptions and ideas that we have created of ourselves and of others. So it is imperative to study how the threat perception has been created within Nepal regarding the MCC. My framework of today's analysis will be based on social identity theory. What social identity theory said is that people have inherent tendency to categorize individuals and peoples and certain groups within different groups, and they construct their identity based on the specific others. And through this group categorization, through this division of people or individuals into different groups, they construct two groups, one in group and other out groups. And this categorization is followed by comparison stress. People compares in group with reference to the out group. And this comparison stress, during this comparison stress, people identify oneself positively and identify others through the negative stereotypes. And if people have shared identity, the degree of threat perception will be lower. And if people have different identity, if people construct their identity different to others, then threat perception will be raised. And if people have positive attributes of others or outgroups, then the threat perception will be lower. If people have negative attributes of the others, then the threat perception will be higher. This is the basic framework that I am going to use in analyzing the construction of threat perception within Nepal regarding the MCC. People have different identities at a time. And for example, if you are applying DV to go to America, you may have positive perception of or positive image of the US. If you are traveling or if you are visiting the Upper Mustang, you may have different perception of the US. You may remember the stories of 1974. So certain group or certain individuals have different identities, and such identities are subject to situational activation. One identity become activated at one point and another identity become activated at another point. So in the case of the foreign aid or foreign assistance, there are 4 situational conditions. Those are aid characteristics, donor characteristics, recipient characteristics, and context characteristics. How the people perceive others based on these characteristics, they construct different types of identities. Let us empirically analyze or empirically study the case of MCC. Regarding the MCC, there are different types of, we can assign different characteristics to MCC, different types of, different aid characteristics to MCC. MCC has said it will help to promote good governance. It will help to reduce the poverty. It is the foreign assistance in the form of non-repayment. These are the good characteristics within MCC. But at the same time, there are other type of characteristics as well, which critics have highlighted. First one is conditionality. Conditionality means the country, for getting the aid, have to fulfill certain conditions. For example, good governance, economic freedom, investment in the people, such type of conditions need to be fulfilled. Second, to come into implementation or to come into effect, it should have to get parliamentary ratification. This is another conditionality. Another factor that the critics have highlighted is controllability of the MCC. The controllability of the MCC, controllability of the aid are incorporated within the compact through the establishment of the MCA as the institutional machinery and primacy of the MCC over the national law and through the audit system. These are the points highlighted by the critics. Regarding the donor characteristics, if we see the United States is the largest bilateral donor of Nepal as of 2019-20. United States is at the distant, but it is very important neighbor of Nepal. And it is advanced democracy. This type of attributes are the positive characteristics of the donor, positive characteristics of United States as a donor. But at the same time, US as a donor is criticized from different perspectives, alliance politics and hegemonic power. United States is criticized by many as a military power that always or that most of the time engage in foreign intervention. If you look the statistics between 1800 and 2017, between 1800 to 1849, United States has engaged in 39 military interventions, overseas military interventions. Between 1850 to 1899, United States engaged in 47 overseas military interventions. Between 1900 to 1949, US engaged in 69 foreign military interventions. Between 1950 to 1999, US engaged in 111 foreign military interventions. All this data shows that the record of the US foreign military intervention is in the increasing trend. One of the data released by the Al Jazeera that it commented is that over the past 70 years, the US military has been deployed to more than 200 countries and territories. That means all these activities that the United States has conducted over the last 70 years and over the last 200 years help people to emphasize or highlight the identity of the US, that it is the military power that engages in interventionist foreign policies. This is another point. And another point is that context characteristics. Right now, we are in the situation where China is rising. China has proposed BRI. At the same time, US has forwarded the FYP, Free and Open Indo-Pacific Strategy, is the China containment strategy. And United States, one of the United States document has argued that Nepal is an emerging partnership for defense cooperation. And at the same time, there is a role of the Quad in the Asia-Pacific region and Indo-Pacific region. The Quad, United States has prioritized Quad, the military alliance, the security alliance between India, Japan, Australia, and itself United States to contain China. So we are in this very different, very difficult context. There is the fear of hegemonic war between the US and China among the people. And the technological and economic decoupling has already started between China and the United States in the form of trade war. So we are in this kind of situation. And regarding the recipient characteristics, this means how we define ourselves. We have different identities, we have different recognition, but how we define ourselves in reference to the MCC. In recognizing ourselves in reference to the MCC, people have raised people have highlighted the issue of sovereignty, non-alignment, and such like things. So we are living in the high esteem society. Nepalese people highlighted or give greater emphasis to the self-recognition, self-dignity, and self-respect. So if you or if any people is given a chance to, or if any people thinks that he have to choose between sovereignty and foreign aid, obviously people will choose sovereignty, because sovereignty has intrinsic value. It has, there is no such thing like good sovereignty or bad sovereignty, but there is such thing like good foreign aid or bad foreign aid. The value of the foreign aid will be determined based on whether it is given with good intention or bad intention, and whether it is mobilized in a good manner or good ways or bad ways. So the society or the people with high self-esteem give greater emphasis to the sovereignty of the country. And second thing is, we have very little things to reciprocate US assistance in Nepal. If US assistance in Nepal or US assistance under the MCC in Nepal is attached with the strategic interest, if we have to fulfill the strategic interest, or if we have to reciprocate the strategic interest of the US in this region, then we cannot do so. That we cannot do so. So people who, the critics of this MCC highlight these two aspects, self-esteem and reciprocity, is the to oppose the MCC. In this situation, the US identity of US positive image has been lowered among the critics, because such as US, as I have already said, that US have positive image as well as negative image. US have positive image is such as advanced democracy, industrialized and developed country with opportunities, development of science and technology, development partner. These are the positive image of US. And US have negative image as well. Superpower, interventionist power, military power involving in arms trade, imperialistic country, capitalist country, securitization of aid, conditionalities and controllability in aid, geopolitical actor. These are the some negative images of the US. So in this situation, among the critics, I am discussing all these issues from the perspective of the critics. How, because I am discussing about how the threat perception has been constructed among the people. So among the critics who are opposing this MCC, they have constructed the negative image of the US. And this negative image of the US become salient among those people. And if you are said to construct the self-recognition or self-image based on the specific others which you have constructed, whose image has been constructed by you negatively, you will recognize your self-identity. Like if US is recognized as interventionist other, alliance country with alliance politics, then you will automatically construct your identity as a sovereign power, sovereign country with a history of valor and bravery. Non-aligned country, you will self-recognize not as a least developed country, but as a sovereign country. You will not recognize yourself as a resource deficit country, but as a country having the aspiration to be self-reliant. So through all these characteristics, context characteristics, aid characteristics, donor characteristics, and recipient characteristics, people construct positive self-image and negative image of the US. So how all these factors help in construction of the threat perception? If people recognize other, or the US is the interventionist other, and self is a sovereign power, then these two identities are very contrasting to each other. Yes, I have already shared something in my framework. If there is a shared identity, there will be threat perception will be lowered. If you have many things to share, then threat perception will be lower. If degree of shared identity decrease, threat perception will be greater. On the other hand, if you assign the negative attributes to the other, then the threat perception will be increased. And if you assign the positive attributes to other, then the threat perception will be, if you assign the positive attributes, threat perception will be decreased. If you assign negative attributes, positive perception, threat perception will be increased. Negative attributes, threat perception increased. So among the critics who assign negative attributes to the US as an outgroup, threat perception has automatically increased. And another fact is that there is a constitutive relationship between the threat perception and aid motivation. Right now, the region around the China is the region of higher threat perception for US. And it is argued that under the high threat environment, security motivation of donor prevails. That means US aid motivations around the region, in the region around China, the security motivation will become predominant. And this, in turn, if the security related aid is given, this security related aid encompasses higher degree of threat perception in recipient. So all these empirical analysis shows that the lowering the identity, lowering the shared identity, negative attributes of the outgroup, and increase in the threat perception in the region around China for US. These all contribute in the increase in the threat perception among the people, among the critics of Nepal regarding the MCC. Now, I want to come back to the initial questions that I have asked. Why there is a lack of consensus even among the critics of MCC? This is due to the difference in activation of situational factors. Some highlighted the 8 characteristics. Those who highlight the 8 characteristics are criticizing MCC based on the content, based on the provision of the compact. Those who are highlighting the donor characteristics, they have different image of the US. They have image, they constructed the US image based on the experience of the last 70 years or last 200 years. And they understood that US is military power and US is interventionist power. And they argued that when MCC come, they will come with military. Such type of argument we can hear. That is due to the perception, that is due to the construction of the US image based on the experiences of the last 70 years or 200 years. And why is the MCC facing opposition while other US assistants are being accepted without protest? This is because if we are discussing about the US foreign aid, other US foreign aid, at that time we recognize US as a in-group member of a development partner, because there is no, we believe that there is no strings attached, geopolitical or strategic strings attached. But in the case of MCC, people think that there is a strings attached, geopolitical strings attached, or strategic strings attached. So people, the different identity become salient. In the case of other identity, other foreign assistance under US, by US, and in the case of MCC, different identity becomes salient. And why does the individual or person, politicians on supporting the MCC oppose latter? This is due to the intergroup mobility of the individual, a person, or a politicians. And why this intergroup mobility happens? This is due to the individual motivations. As argued by Thucydides, people are motivated by different motivations, different interests, such as fear, love, greed. This type of motivations help people to have intergroup mobility, and peoples may have different perception. So finally, I want to conclude my presentation by arguing that the opposition to the MCC Nepal is not only due to the substance of the compact, but also due to the image that the US has constructed itself in the past. The new dynamics in the regional and international power equation, that is the contextual characteristics. Sometimes the cognitive inconsistency is problematizing the MCC. For example, we can see that in 2000, if I'm not wrong, in 2018, one of the US officials said that MCC is a part of the Indo-Pacific strategy. But later, with the strong opposition within the Nepalese politics, US Embassy in Nepal said that it is not the part of the Indo-Pacific strategy. This type of cognitive inconsistency is also problematizing the MCC. And this type of cognitive inconsistency is also can also be observed within the Nepalese politics. In the domestic arena, support to or opposition of the MCC should not be treated as an individual's test of nationalism. It is not fair to blame people who oppose MCC as the anti-development activist, or it is not fair to treat or blame people who are supporting MCC as the anti-nationalist. So it should not become the test of nationalism or the test of support or opposite to the nationalism. It's the academic discussions and policy discussions should be focused on the rational basis, and this should be focused on giving some policy inputs to the policymakers. With this, I want to conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Well, Dilli Ramji, could you please stop your video? Okay. Thank you, Dilli Ramji, for briefing us how the threat perception has been created and also highlighting the differences among the critics who are opposing the ratification of the compact. And I now would like to call another our panelist, Bishal Thapa, and he is an energy sector professional with 20 years global experience in the sector, and he currently works in India and Nepal and is closely associated with the energy sector in both countries. Mr. Bishal Thapa, are you there?
Yes. Great, thank you very much. Thanks very much for inviting me to this session. It's a pleasure to be in here. I'm not sure if there was any specific question you wanted me to address other than to react to Mr. Dilli's presentation or the general subject. First of all, I think it's very important that we are all more precise in the language we use. So whether we are objecting to MCC, whether we are objecting to the compact, whether we are objecting to the project is very important to both specify. And I think it's important to be a little bit more precise in that, so that both the nature of the objections or the nature of the support that we are offering is very clear. So from my point of view, I have no objections to the MCC. I have no objections to the compact, but I have been a strong opponent of this project for a long time. In fact, I think I've been an opponent of this particular project way before the MCC even came. So I object to this project, not on the merits of the legal framework or the agreement that has been proposed. I'm aware of the work that MCC has done in other countries, and I think in general, it's a pretty good instrument. I have objected to the MCC on the grounds or I have objected to this particular project on the grounds that it will never be profitable for Nepal to totally interconnect with the Indian power markets, because Nepal will never be able to compete. And so way before the MCC came in 2007, at that time I was in India and I used to do a lot of analysis with Indian and Nepal power markets. As I was studying it, I found that the more you interconnect with India, the more and more you will begin to displace new builds in Nepal. So when I first made that case in 2007, I was really struck by the analysis, and I presented it at a conference. And I remember, I received a lot of flack for that thought. But in some sense, if you look over the years, that has really been validated. So my primary concern around this set of projects is that it pushes Nepal into a competitive environment with India. It will effectively displace the construction of significant new capacity in Nepal. And it essentially, makes Nepal very dependent on Indian electricity imports for the rest of the future. So that has been the basis of my objection. I followed this debate quite closely, and I must say the debate has been very disappointing. Partly because we have allowed this debate to be a discussion about US interests in Nepal, or about its opposition to China, or about some kind of geopolitical strategy, etc. And I think everything in Nepal obviously is geopolitical. But I think we have failed because we have not been able, I don't think there's been any conversation significant in nature about really the underlying energy sector and what this means for Nepal. And so in some sense, Dilli Raj's presentation is very illustrative because it highlights the point. His entire conversation was about threat perceptions related to the positioning of Nepal versus others. And who has created that narrative? Actually, that narrative has been created by Nepal's intelligentsia. It's been created by Nepal academics. And it's been the failure of Nepal's bureaucracy, the civil service, to basically bring this debate to a point that talks really about the project and its parameters, rather than allowing it to be constructed as something about geopolitical competition in Nepal. And so we've allowed this debate to sort of get totally out of hand. And I think this continued narrative, which has been entirely promoted, I would say, by Nepal's both civil society, academic intelligentsia, I think has really failed and betrayed the country in this sense. And this, for me, watching it has been a very, very disappointing debate. Even as we speak, I think this debate is now a little bit irrelevant, because whether MCC project actually happens or not, the objectives of this project has already been met. Look, what were the preconditions for this project? The precondition was that Nepal would interconnect and sign an agreement on the Indian borderlines. That process is already underway, right? So whether this project comes or not, that interconnection is already taking place. The other requirement was that Nepal establish an electricity regulatory commission, which is already done. And there was one or two other preconditions. So even before this agreement has been actually formalized, all of the objectives of the agreement has already been met. And so whether we continue to have this debate or not is pretty much an end story. Like, it's sort of meaningless now, because what the project may have set out to do, the preconditions it set, has already been satisfied. So it's a little bit of a mute discussion. It's a little bit of an irrelevant discussion, because the whole nature of Nepal's power sector will, I think, now fundamentally undergo a change, with or without the investments that comes through the MCC. I think perhaps the last point may be worth noting, and academics such as Dilli and others who look at this issue from a more theoretical aspect, is worth noting is to ask the question, what would have happened if the MCC actually had come a little bit earlier when we still had load shedding? MCC was always constructed for an era where we had huge and large amounts of load shedding. The fact that it got delayed was probably its greatest failure, in the sense that if this project had come at a time when we still had load shedding, I don't think we would have heard this debate. I think the MCC would have been done, dusted. All of the perceptions that we're talking about, threat perceptions, etc., I think would not have been there. So this is, these are my sort of brief perceptions about this debate, having followed this sector quite closely and watched these developments. I think it is a very, very unfortunate debate, and I think there is much that we have to learn. Whether it ultimately gets realized or not, who knows? But I think there's a lot that we have to learn from this debate. Not perhaps in terms of maybe the political leadership, but in terms of the failures that have come from civil society and that has come from the bureaucracy and the civil service of Nepal. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Bishalji, for expressing your opinion regarding the debate on MCC. We have our next speaker now, and I now would like to call Sagar Karki. And Sagar Karki is a researcher at NIICE and is currently pursuing master's degree in international business management at the University of West of England, offered by the British College Kathmandu. Well, Sagarji, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, you can proceed now.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen. Is it visible? Could you confirm?
Yes, it is visible, Sagarji.
Thank you. Thank you. So I would like to start my presentation from an observer perspective rather than a let's say a debater, because I'm not particularly an expert on the energy sector or on IR in particular, but I'll just present the fact and figures based on my observation that I have had of MCC and Nepal's dilemma regarding this project. So firstly, I will just introduce the what is the MCC all about, and how it was formed and how it came into being. Then I'll be talking about the MCC's relationship with Nepal and how it has been built since then, since the signing of the compact. And then thirdly, I will talk about the issues of contentions regarding this project, and then finally what will be the possible ways forward for Nepal. Now, firstly, MCC or the Millennium Challenge Corporation, it's an agency formed by the US Congress in January 2004, and it's basically an agency devoted, according to their website, it's devoted for the economic growth, poverty alleviation, and the strengthening the institutions. Now, as you all know, there is another institution called USAID that is also working on similar grounds, but this particular corporation focuses mainly on the as they have pointed out, on the strengthening institutions or the governance mechanism of the particular country that they are working on. Now, briefly talking about the timeline of MCC in Nepal, it was signed in September 2017 by the then finance minister and the director of MCC, and this is a $500 million compact project that is mainly sponsored by the US government, and some part of it is also has to be contributed from the Nepalese government, and mainly for the building the road or maintaining the road and building the transmission lines in Nepal. And we can see that after this signing, just 4 years after that, we can see the visit of the vice president of MCC, Fatima Z. Somar in Nepal. This actually sparked us with controversy, like regarding if the US is trying to pressure Nepal to pass or rectify the agreement. Then we had the visit from US Assistant Secretary Mr. Donald Blue, and so these all show the concern of the US government regarding this particular project. Now, the issues of contention. So I have particularly identified these 4 major issues. The first one is like, unlike other, as Mr. Dilli also pointed out, unlike other projects, this particular project needs parliamentary endorsement. So that means it has to be passed through consensus from the Parliament of Nepal. So this makes this project a little bit unique on that side, and further controversial based on this provision. Secondly, there is this possible threat to national sovereignty and security. This is basically on the grounds that the Sri Lanka rejected MCC for Millennium Challenge Corporation. This was the ground that they stated that it would hamper their national sovereignty, so they rejected this particular compact. Thirdly, we have this some controversial clauses that have been pointed out by the critics in criticizing this compact, particularly related to sections 6.8 and 7.1. This I'll be discussing further in the next slide. And then fourthly, we have this whether this compact is related to the Indo-Pacific strategy or not. So this is also a very controversial issue because Nepal, which is follows and which is trying to follow the non-alignment foreign policy, doesn't want to interfere and get into the great power politics, mainly including these 3 major powers: China, India, and US. Now, talking about the clauses of contention, these are the major clauses. The first 6.8, the main thing of the stated in this clause is that the government waives is stated as the any and all claims against MCC or US government. So basically, it is saying like the government of Nepal cannot penalize or bring into court the whatever the losses or damages that is caused by this particular project, and the officials or employees of this project will be immune from the jurisdiction of all court and tribunals of Nepal for any claim or loss arising out of the activities or omission under this compact. So this is according to the critics, this is a major point of contention in this clause because it somehow states that this compact may be this above the domestic laws of Nepal, because in the next section we see in the 7.1 section, the parties understand that this compact upon entry into force will prevail over the domestic laws of Nepal. So this is these are the 2 main clauses of contention. Now, finally, what can be the possible way forward? The first is, as we all know, that the government is willing to pass this particular compact, and it has already formed a special board called the Millennium Challenge Account Nepal Development Board that is under the Ministry of Finance and chaired by the Secretary of Finance. And so what the government is willing, but there are, as we all know, the public opinions and public dissatisfaction on this, and the negotiations on the clause are not seem to be discussed because the US side is not willing to negotiate on the terms and conditions as of now. And we all know that inside Nepal also there are differing views. We have stated some newspaper articles like some politicians and leaders do not like MCC to be passed, and some in the government would like it to be passed. And same with the private sector. Uh, some considered it vital, and some say that Nepal can do it without the compact. And but finally, the decision, as we all know, is in the hands of the people or the people's representative in the parliament of Nepal, whether they want to rectify this particular compact or they do not want. So basically, finally, in the hands of the people or the people's representative, the parliament of Nepal. With this, I would like to conclude my presentation, and I would like to give floor for further discussion.
Thank you so much, Sagarji, for your detailed presentation. And also you have mentioned the causes of the contention and when MCC signed and when and how the MCC was signed. And also you have interestingly mentioned the visit of MCC Vice President Fatima Zisumar and US Assistant Secretary of State Donald Lu, and what happened during the visit, and also at the end of their presentation, and also suggesting the ways out for this debate. Well, thank you so much, Sagarji. I now would like to call our another panelist for today, and I think he's the final panelist for this conversation. And I would like to invite now Mr. Anurag Acharya. Mr. Anurag Acharya has a decade-long experience working on Nepal's governance and politics, and through research and programming with different national and international organizations. And currently he leads research on political governance and foreign policy at PEI. I would like to welcome Anuragji. Anuragji, are you there?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, you can proceed your presentation.
Thank you, Dela. My greetings to everybody, including colleagues at NIICE, who have invited me to speak. I was listening very keenly to previous speakers. Dilli in particular has a very interesting take on this debate, where he presents negative perception, the idea of negative perception leading to higher threat perception. I think that's a discourse that we can continue in terms of how recipient countries perceive the donor countries. It's quite interesting. But I would like to take more recipient perspective. Domestic discourse, and I'll make three major contentions. I'll raise three major contentions around MCC debate that can be examined. The first being the domestic discourse itself. We all know that the initial disinformation that shouted around MCC debate, much of that dust has already settled, so I'll not get into that. But let's see, how some of that, actually led to the, larger controversy around this MCC. I mean, as a student of IR and somebody who's, keen interest in foreign policy discourse, I wish, we had been able to reach out more to Nepali media and civil society, engage more to explain them how some of these basic theoretical tenets around IR, that there are no free lunches in IR, and that every country, whether it's a donor or a recipient, is responsible for securing its own mutual interests. I mean, in this respect, it might be China, India, or other things about bilateral negotiations between two sovereign nations in this so as it does not directly go against their own core interest. And if Nepal government believes that it has not acted on it against any of its friendly neighbor by getting into this agreement, then we as a citizens do not have any reason to build conspiracy theory around it. And then there are other problems around this domestic discourse as well. For instance, the basic lack of fact check. I mean, something like, is MCC pact above Nepal constitution? I mean, I have gone through the document a couple of times and I could not see it written anywhere. In fact, it says that, either party can, opt out of this pact anytime, giving notice to the previous party. So, how would you know for sure? Because you just have to read the document, right? And less has been, read and more has been talked about it, I guess, in this case. And then there are, clauses, talk about, how there are hidden texts and clauses that have not been, made public. Well, we've waited for a couple of years, haven't we? And we've not seen any of these documents coming out in public. So is there still a doubt that there might be a hidden text? At least I personally don't think we'll see any other document in this regard. And then there are clauses being talked about, how some of these clauses have long-term ramifications for Nepal, that it would outlast the pact itself of 5 years. And except for those clauses related to compensation claim cases that might end up in Nepali court, which might drag, understandably, and those related to financial settlements, I did not see any clauses that would outlast this pact. And I read, line to line. I'm sure many of you have read. So, I mean, what are we opposing over here then? And then, yes, there is another clause about parliamentary ratification. Again, this is our domestic requirement, mind you. It's not mentioned anywhere in the document. So I question, why there was so much outrage over MCC deal. So, the only reason that I could come up with is because this is probably the first time Nepal's big bilateral aid agreement was transparently made available to people, where people could read through it even before it went into, action. So there was understandably a public discourse around it, which I think it's a good beginning that Nepal government has done this, and probably all future aid agreements, including some other quote unquote controversial agreements, and all of these should be made publicly available so that there is greater public discourse around it. But yes, I think media, civil society, and even people like us who have keen interest in aid and diplomacy issues, we need to engage more closely and maybe talk more constructively around these issues, so that there is more of a public discourse and less of these fear mongering and conspiracy theories around it. So which brings me to the second point of contention that we must discuss, which is, will we benefit from this infrastructure that this aid is funding, the talked about transmission line? I mean, there are plenty of experts who seem to disagree. I mean, I heard Bishalji talk about his own arguments about how we might not, this might not be all hunky dory that everybody is making this out to be. Well, this is not my area of expertise, but as a citizen, I'm like, this is more of a technical area. But as a citizen and a development student, I also have my say on this, and I think yes, there are problems that Nepal has faced unlocking India's energy market in the past. So we might have misgiving about how much will we benefit from this, but this region is partly due to regulatory complications on our side, but also due to India's own conservative take on Nepal's policy, which many in India's foreign policy discourse have agreed, and they have called for more frank engagement with Nepal, which is quite welcome. We can spend an entire day talking about this, but just let's move on from this and focus on our subject. So what has changed in recent years that India has opened up its energy market to Nepal? Again, there might be a lot of reason for this, and we might be tempted to overanalyze this. But important thing is India has not just invited Nepal to participate in its energy market, but also accelerated the Butwal-Gorakhpur transmission agreement after years of lingering. So it is not surprising that Nepal will be tempted to put an infrastructure in place on its side to facilitate this energy exchange. This is where MCC's planned transmission line will help. The project was identified as a priority by not even before this. I'm like Bishalji rightly pointed out. This this idea of energy trade was there even before the idea of MCC was floated. So if you take into consideration Nepal's disaster risk, especially to our big infrastructure high in the Himalayas, including the hydropower stations, then probably a cross-border transmission line is a good investment to make. Just in case, as a backup to bring in energy, emergency electricity supply. Bishalji was talking about how Nepal would have benefited if this line would have been constructed, back then when Nepal was facing load shedding. But I would say that probably it will we can still benefit, because we are prone to these kind of disasters, and there is no guarantee that another will not strike and some we will not face the acute power shortage that we faced in the past. So and also please remember that India-Nepal transmission line was already agreed on secretary level even before this document was signed, or something was written in the annex that was made out of a big deal. As far as Nepal's hydropower developers' competitiveness is concerned, there is no option but I feel there is no option but to improve and become more efficient producers in the future. It's a free market, and they have to be optimistic about their project. India's and one of the argument made about Nepal's how Nepal cannot be competitive is about India's quote unquote cheap electricity. But we also have to remember that India's so-called cheap electricity comes at a comes with a big carbon footprint. Around 60% of India's energy generation is dependent on fossil fuel, particularly coal. The volatility in the international market around fossil fuel market will always impact India's energy sector. Besides, India will always be under pressure to reduce its carbon footprints, look for more cleaner energy sources. So this is where Nepal can cash in. Besides, our round-the-year generation capacity will also help us extract premium charges. And like these are all technical things that more energy experts would talk about. But there was a very interesting report, 2019 report by U.S. Department of Energy. It's a National Renewable Energy Lab, I guess. The name of the report, I've quoted it here somewhere. Regulatory Foundations for Cross-Border Electricity Trading. So it mentions that Nepal does have competitive edge when it comes to cross-border trading, provided it does its homework and puts in place certain policy reforms that will be of advantage to domestic developers. So moving from that, there will also be other arguments why sell electricity. Like we've heard this again. Why not improve our own per capita consumption? That will help growth. But we need to ask, investors who are worried about domestic investors who have invested millions of dollars and who are now worried about Nepal's current electric consumption. And like NE has been, requesting, consumers to consume more electricity, giving, subsidies on tariff. And then there is a bleak export prospect. So understandably, the trading surplus energy and improving our own per capita consumption should not be necessarily exclusive choices. And like both are desirable scenarios, and I don't see why both cannot go hand in hand. So this brings me to third and final contention that we should discuss. Why then Nepal government is not ratifying the agreement that it has worked so hard to negotiate. I'm like, this agreement has been in process for last 4 or 5 years. And the problem I see is leadership and the party that is in power, who lack confidence and conviction in what they believe. I'm like, for instance, former prime minister who called for national support to ratify this pact while leading the government is now dragging his foot while in the opposition. Well, because he's in the opposition. And then the current prime minister who cannot muster up and rally his coalition partner into supporting the deal, because he's also worried about the upcoming elections. And then the coalition partner has also found a very good bargaining chip in this MCC deal to strike, more stronger coalition deals during the upcoming elections. So you see, all the leaders that were part of this preparing this deal are now involved, but they don't want to take accountability of this deal. So this is a very sad scenario, I guess. In short, MCC deal has now fallen victim to Nepal's chaotic domestic politics, I guess. And there is no use pointing fingers to external factors. I mean, like as a student of IR, I'm myself aware about these external factors and how important they are in domestic discourse. But mind you, as important as they are, it's the domestic constituents that call the shots. And they will not call the shots unless it is in their interest. So external forces will have their say, but it's at the end, it's the domestic political forces that call the shots. So I will conclude by saying that yes, there may be space for more negotiations for Nepal in this deal, and they might actually pursue that. But have we had a constructive public discourse around these possibilities? I would say no. Instead, media and civil society, and I would include experts, all of us have engaged in something else and everything else but constructive discourse. As for Nepal government, I mean, like all I can say is it cannot organize investment summits and then call for international aid and investments to improve, to invest and improve its infrastructure, and then sort of turn down, quote unquote humiliate, if you will, a friendly neighbor that has agreed to provide you a substantial fund of 500 million, potentially very important investment. That destroys Nepal's international credibility, I feel. Never mind the diplomatic disaster and the embarrassment that we will continue to face over the years. More than anything, I think as a citizen, civil society and media, and this is what we need to be worried more about, I guess. I'll rest there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anurag Z, for putting your views based on your decade-long work and experiences. And very interestingly, you've said that why our leaders are being divided on this issue. So we have all our speakers have almost finished their presentation, and our floor of discussion is, we are about to open the floor of discussion, and we have got so many questions on this issue, as it is the debate of current time. So I have received many questions from Facebook as well, and many our participants have also put their queries to our all the speakers. And first, I would like to read one question that I've got from Facebook, and that is, I think it's for all the speakers. And if Nepal does not approve MCC, what will Nepal lose again? There is a fear in Nepal that if MCC is not passed, it will isolate Nepal among the international community in general and the US in particular. How far is this true? Do you think it is likely? And yes, there is another question as well. Is there any link between MCC and the Indo-Pacific strategy in Nepal? Often MCC is linked with the Indo-Pacific strategy. So do you think there is any link between the two? And I've also received some other questions from Facebook that I would like to read now. And the question one is, there no constitutional provision as Article 247 explicitly states that only 4 treaties, number A, peace and friendship, B, security related, C, border alteration, and division of natural resources, need to be ratified by the parliament? Where does MCC compact fits unless the constitution is amended? This is the first one. The second one is, in case of security threat to MCC project and its personnel during 5 years period, who to give the security? Bring security personnel from USA or Nepal to give security to their supposedly 4,000 personnel. And the third one is, as per WIPO, out of 6 areas, human scientific discoveries and findings of geographic indicators falls under IPR. How such geological discoveries as per agreement owns by MCC only without liabilities of royalties despite 1/4, that is Nepal, $130 million investment? So these are the questions that I have received from Facebook. So I would like to request all our speakers to address this, to pick out some 3 or 4 questions and to address these questions. And yes, I would also like to read out some questions from the participants. And the questions that I have received are, now some Nepalese leaders, this question is from Madan Kumar Mittal to all the speakers. Now some Nepalese leaders are negatively present and advocates regarding the MCC as like the negative view of Arun III before 20 years approximate. That thought was wrong, which is proved now. Just some people wants to break the FDI and development of Nepal. This is the view of anti-American and European in Nepal. I think this is just his statement. And I have also received question from Upendra Man Shrestha, and I think this is for everyone. And his question is, our internal politics is very dynamic, as once a government is changed from policy making to bureaucrats are changed. On this situation, should we become a part of MCC? Isn't MCC is a wing of Indo-Pacific, and can't we take Indo-Pacific soft power and high power as AUKUS? Today it might not see, but later, what if Khampa insurgency scenario come? Let's first make peace zone land, not riots land. Well, and yes, this is, and the next question is for Mr. Bishal Thapa. The MCC is also perceived as a plot to privatize the Electricity Authority of Nepal. To what extent is this true, and what could be the outcomes of this? Well, these are some questions, and we have also got question from Nabaraj Gautam, and that is for all our panelists. Indian diaspora has not confident to invest in Nepal. How it would be possible reduce the bilateral issues? And the next one is, unlike the Indian politica take it as granted to define Nepal as little brother, we will not find the way to collaborate at global issues. how do you think the changing perception of global diplomacy? Do you think India should clean the wrong mindset on these political issues? So, well, these are the questions that I have received from Facebook and from our participants, and some of them have also put their statements, opinions in the chat box. So I would like to request our speakers. I would like to start from Dilli Ramzi to please. I would like to request to start the floor of discussion.
Thank you, Dela ma'am. First of all, I would like to make one small correction that in the background you have said I'm a student of Kyoto University, but I am a student of Ritsumeikan University in Kyoto. I want to make a small correction on it. And there are many questions regarding the MCC because it is a very controversial issue right now in Nepal. I want to pick up some questions. First of all, who problematize it? Is it only problematized because of its own inherent problem, or it is problematized by someone else? This is the major issue right now we have to discuss on. As I have discussed, based on the 4 situational conditions, based on the inherent provisions of the compact, the criticisms raised by the critics, the point raised out by the critics regarding some of the provisions are valid. For example, regarding the prevalence or primacy of the domestic law, or primacy or the prevalence of the compact over the domestic law, such like things are valid. We cannot ignore such type of criticisms by saying that such type of comments are baseless or such type of comments are anti-development, are raised from the anti-development approach. This is one point I want to say. And another is that as I am discussing through the social psychological perspective, the cognitive inconsistency within Nepal, Nepalese intellectuals or politicians, and cognitive inconsistency in the part of US officials. This cognitive inconsistency is also problematizing this issue. As I have already said that once the US official said that it is a part of Indo-Pacific strategy, when it get serious attention within Nepalese politics, when it is protested by the Nepalese politicians and intellectuals, people started, US officials said that it is not a part of MCC. So what is the reality? This type of cognitive inconsistency among both contracting parties, among the officials and politicians or intellectuals in the both sides, this is also problematizing this issue because it raised the suspicion among the people. So it is creating problems. Another point I want to pick up is that what are the things that Nepal will lose and what are the things Nepal will gain by joining this project or by rejecting this project. There are both pros and cons in both sides. If Nepal did not ratify, if Nepal do not ratify this compact, it will have both things. If it is really threatening to the Nepal's sovereignty, Nepal will gain something. If it has not threatening elements, Nepal will lose something by rejecting it. For example, if Nepal do not accept or Nepal reject this compact, it has not only the instrumental value, but also it has some, what I want to say is that some indicative value. That means this MCC has come to Nepal based on certain conditions, based on certain indicators, and this indicate that Nepal's investment environment has been improved, or investment climate has been improved. So rejecting these, or if US withdraw this aid, this will give message that there is no, this may give message that there is no investment friendly climate in Nepal. And such type of message can be spread or can be delivered in the international investors. So this is a serious issue we need to consider. Another point that the one question I have heard is that will it isolate Nepal in the international community, particularly in the US foreign policy? I don't think so. Rejecting it by Nepal's parliament or Nepal's government will not result in the isolation of Nepal from the US perspective in the international arena. I don't think so. Because there are a lot of issues that US and Nepal has to deal with. Nepal and US relation is not only based upon this one project. It has long history of relations. There are many issues that both the countries have to deal with, and Nepal and US has many sectors on which both are cooperating. And as I have already said, Nepal is, US is the top bilateral donor in Nepal. So I do not think that it will isolate Nepal from the US foreign policy. With this, I want to share the floor. I want to hand over the floor to other participants, other panelists. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dilli Ramzi, for addressing the questions. And I now would like to move to our another panelist, Bishal Thapaji. Or would you please address some of the questions that we have received?
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thanks for the questions, and also appreciate the remarks of the previous panelists. I just want to respond to a few questions. I think there were a lot more that possibly need to be addressed, but I'll just get to a few. The first question was whether this is a perception of the plot that electricity is, being privatized, or NEA is going to be privatized. And obviously, I have no basis to confirm that perception. I think in general, the question that we should ask, which you haven't quite heard in this conversation, is, why is it that MCC was chosen to provide this grant to Nepal? USAID, as I think previous speakers have said, is already the largest bilateral donor. So why not just continue to use USAID to provide this grant? Why this whole system of MCC? And in part because I think the MCC is it's not I think, the MCC is a different instrument. Unlike USAID, it answers to Congress. It doesn't answer to the executive. And second, it's designed to promote market-based interventions. And I possibly differ on the way. Before the MCC was actually done, the MCC also had to provide a scorecard, a report card that basically had to say that, preconditions on the competitiveness of the market, et cetera, the preconditions had been met. And I think if you look at the report card, I actually disagree with the report card because it I think misrepresents the extent to which Nepal is a competitive market. This project doesn't foster a competitive market. The creation of an electricity regulation commission is only one aspect of a competitive market. This project actually intensifies the monopoly of NEA. It dilutes the competitiveness in electricity markets. It undermines the opportunities because it exaggerates the role of NEA. So contrary to the spirit of MCC, the project itself is actually very, very detrimental to the interests of reforms in the electricity sector because it intensifies and it strengthens the monopoly of NEA. So I think, privatization is a big word, but we would have loved to see NEA being unbundled. And in the context of a federal Nepal, we would have loved to see Nepal move towards being restructured in terms of ownership to the federal level. But I don't see that happening. And in part, this project is an important detriment to that progress. So I think that's the way I would answer that question. There was also another question about whether this would be beneficial or detrimental, if we did or did not do this project. And maybe the way to answer that is really divide the question into two parts, or divide my response into two parts. Look at it from a purely energy sector, and then look at it in terms of the geopolitics and the implications that colleagues like Dilli, Raj, and others have commented on. The first is, from an energy sector, now it's irrelevant. Whether you do or do not do the project, the sector of Nepal is entirely changed. The energy sector of Nepal is changed because Nepal is moving ahead to interconnection with Indian markets. Anurag ji has said that one of the things, I think he a little bit misrepresented what I said, or misunderstood perhaps what I said. I did not say that the transmission lines would have been beneficial at the time of load shedding. What I said is that when I did the analysis back in 2006, 2007, Nepal actually announced 4 transmission lines. And I made the case that because you announce these lines, what happens is people stop building plants in Nepal. So if you go and look back at that period in history, you will realize that you could conclude that the announcement of these transmission lines actually leads to and intensifies or makes bigger the load shedding that occurred. If you did not announce those lines, the 4 transmission lines with India, actually we would not have suffered such a huge load shedding. This is my argument. And Anurag ji also has said, although he started off by saying that I'm not an expert in this sector, I find that the conversation a lot of time dilutes this point about whether interconnection with India is beneficial or not. And in some sense, nobody knows. Like, look, I'm an analyst. I've crunched numbers. I've looked at forecasts. He gave out some statistics about 60% of India being coal, and India is now going to be carbon neutral by 2070. They made a big change in COP26 from phase out to phase down. So who knows, right? But we are both making a bet here. We don't know the future. I am saying that fundamentally, Nepal cannot compete with Indian power markets. What does that mean? Large hydro plants are not going to get built. Forget that 15,000 megawatts. It ain't going to happen because there's cheaper power from India. And the other reason that I think people sometimes misunderstand this is that this is not a nationalistic thing. I don't really care whether hydro is built in Nepal or not. I'm saying if Nepal should get cheaper access, cheaper electricity from India, why not use it? Why should we develop thousands of megawatts when we have the cheaper source there? Why should we not buy it? So the point is that exactly whether we'll be competitive and export millions and trillions of rupees worth of electricity or not in the future, we don't know. I am, based on my analysis, I have suggested that it's not possible. In effect, over the course of time, Nepal's electricity markets will not be able to compete with India and will essentially be importing, and those interconnection points basically provide the conduits for those imports to occur. I think Anurag ji and others are saying, no, we could export. So there's no way to find out other than at that point. So 5, 10, 15 years down the road, we should ask the question, who was right? And the question at that time is then who bears the accountability for this? And so I think that is the question to really put it in context. So back to the question which the audience had asked in terms of whether this is beneficial from energy sector, as I said, is that now it doesn't matter because the precondition for interconnection with India is pretty much set. Whether MCC gives the money and we build these transmission lines into, in domestic transmission lines, east-west, it doesn't matter now because it's all done now. Now we're interconnected. So whether the investment comes or not, Nepal's energy sector is now fundamentally changed. We must prepare, in my view, for a future where there will be increasingly higher volumes of imports from India. And it will not happen in the next 1 or 2 years. But I guarantee you, in the next 10 years, that is my bet. There will be a lot of imports. So I think from an energy sector point of view, it doesn't matter now because it's done. The chapter is closed with or without the investment. And so in some sense, it's kind of a smart project. You create the fundamentals without actually having to invest. What it does for the geopolitics, who knows? Like, whether it has implications for Nepal in terms of the geopolitics, in terms of its diplomatic standing, who knows? Lots of countries change their minds on international agreements. And so I have no basis to answer that question. But fundamentally, I encourage everybody to think about this issue, not in the context of its geopolitics or its threat perceptions, but to ask the question, is it really a sound energy investment decision? Is it a good strategy? I have reviewed, as I said, almost all of the MCC documents. I worked in this sector. And while my views are maybe one of many other views, certainly, I just encourage this debate to focus a little bit more on the fundamentals. I remember as I was like trying to make this case, I wrote to somebody who was a pretty big proponent of MCC, a very public figure, and who basically wrote back to me saying that, that issue, we don't need to worry about because the other issues are important. So I just encourage everybody to think about the underlying fundamentals about what this debate is. It's not about India versus China versus US versus us versus this, that. Look, we're in a complicated geopolitical space. What matters is where we want the energy sector to go. And finally, for people who are parsing the language and the agreement, I encourage you to think about two stats. First, between the time the MCC debate has started and now, Nepal has borrowed more than 500 million, what the MCC would have given on energy sector. Just yesterday, there was a big loan that was closed with ADB. The World Bank has given millions of dollars towards transmission lines and distribution lines. ADB has given similarly. We've borrowed more than 500 million. Nobody has looked at those agreements. Those agreements are a lot harsher than what you see in this MCC. There is in those agreements, we're giving sovereign guarantees. That means the country has provided its stake. All of those agreements require that no change in law clause, which is the one that was being pointed out, was there. But those agreements don't come into parliament. And because they don't come into parliament, nobody discusses it. So I think one of the great benefits of MCC has been it has forced these kinds of agreements into parliament, which is where is the right forum to discuss it. In fact, I would go one step further to say all the lending and borrowing that Nepal does should come to parliament. Agreements with the World Bank, with the ADB should come into parliament and should be evaluated. And if that means we can't borrow it, so be it. Like parliament has to do its job. But I think that's the other thing we need to bear in mind, that the terms that are in MCC is very consistent with the terms that are there in other agreements, which are in fact far harsher because we are borrowing and we are making all of those commitments with sovereign guarantees. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Bishalji, for very wonderfully addressing the questions and queries of our participants and our Facebook audiences. And I would now like to move to our another panelist. I would like to request Sagar Karki for addressing some of the questions, 3 or 4 questions put by our audiences, Facebook audience, as I read out and put by our participants.
Thank you, ma'am. Firstly, I would just like to comment on some of the speakers, like Sir Dilli sir talked mostly from the theoretical and IR perspective on the on how MCC would impact Nepal, and Bishal sir also talked about from the energy perspective, like about MCC. Now the first question was related to, that I remember, was related to the constitutional provision on which law and what kind of laws needs constitutional amendment or rectification. And we all know, like if that is true, then we know how loose and how weak is our political leadership, because it shows that we have not considered our own laws and regulations before uh, signing any compact. Sorry, that might affect our country. So this, I think, is a result of the frequent political change in our country, the political instability, and the change in policies and plans that occur whenever a government is changed. So I think before signing this compact, if there had been a comprehensive dialogue and discussion among the not just the politicians but among the IR, energy and infrastructure experts, then then we would be on the safer side, because we would already know what will be the implications, what will be the profits, what will be the cost and benefit of this particular project for Nepal, not just economically, but from a geopolitical and strategic point of view. So that is my uh, comment on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sagarji, for putting your comments. And I now would like to move to another panelist, Anurag Acharya. Well, I'm extremely sorry, Anurag-ji, for making you wait for so long, as you had already raised your hand. So I'd like to request you to address some of the questions.
Thank you, Dela-ji. I'll begin by responding to acknowledging rather than responding to Bishalji's clarifications, duly noted. But yes, we do at least agree that there's no. I mean, like at least I agree what you're saying, that there is no way of knowing whether Nepal will benefit from this, transmission line or the energy trading with India in the long run. Luckily, that's not the decision that I would be making. I'm not the expert, as I mentioned before, but at least those authorized to make that decision seem to believe that Nepal will benefit. So I'm betting on their expertise and waiting to see whether we will indeed benefit from it. But I'll respond more to the other two questions that I find interesting. The first one is whether the security of staffs that that will be engaged in this project, MCC project, will be responsibility of US government or Nepal government. I mean, like this pertains to the disinformation and the simple lack of fact check that I was mentioning in my earlier presentation. I mean, if this is still being discussed, despite the fact that this answer has been put up in the basic facts in the MCA website, which is the authorized Nepal government body, which is responsible for rolling out MCC project, then I think we need to, or the government needs to communicate more with civil society and media on such issue. And whatever I have read about this issue is the MCA response is no, the responsibility of all the staffs providing security is Nepal government's responsibility. So that's that. And the more interesting question is regarding whether, and quite expected, whether MCC and Indo-Pacific strategy are related, whether there is some deep underlying conspiracy behind this MCC. Well, again, the first in my earlier presentation, I had mentioned that we should have more frank and open discourse around aid diplomacy in Nepal. And I think whatever controversy that and conspiracy theory we are hearing right now might be actually the result of the lack of that discourse. I mean, it's as simple as saying that whatever diplomatic engagements US has with rest of the world or with other regional powers might not have anything to do with this MCC deal, but US foreign policy on its aid cannot be exclusive of its larger foreign policy. So it's saying while the both are not directly related, it's not that both are exclusive of each other. Just like Nepal might have its individual aid interests with India, but Nepal can at the same time also have its own aid relationship and interest with China. Considering the fact that India and China do have their existing issues with each other, has nothing to do with how we engage with India or China. It's the same with MCC. I'm like MCC is a aid compact, and like Nepal may benefit from it or may not benefit from it. It is up to Nepal to decide. And the last 4 years of preparation on Nepal government's side shows that Nepal government, officially believes that we have something to benefit from this compact aid, and we have, prepared. We are prepared to accept it. It's just the matter of this discourse going into Parliament and being ratified. All I'm saying is that we might have to engage more with civil society and media on this issue, or Nepal government needs to engage more with civil society and media on this issue and explain, look, aid diplomacy is part of any foreign policy engagement between two countries, and there are give and takes. We cannot say for certain that US government does not have any other interest in Nepal beside giving us $500 million. It does. I mean, like every country that gives you aid has its own geopolitical interest, strategic interest. As a recipient, what we should be thinking is whether it is in our interest to take that money and still be in a position to balance off their interests against our core interest, while at the same time protecting interests of our other friendly neighbors that we have committed to protect. So, in essence, this is a balancing of, interests between the recipient country as well as the donor country. And on donor country's side, guaranteeing that it also, keeps interests of its other friendly neighbors into consideration while getting into such agreements. So in this case, if Nepal government believes that it has achieved all those objectives, then it should be able to convince that to the people, in this case, media, civil society. Unfortunately, that has not been the case, which is why we see, X number of, YouTube videos with, conspiracy theory about, US naval base coming to Nepal, floating around, which is completely, not what you would expect. If government had, been more rigorous in its, conversation with media and civil society in the last so many years that it has been preparing for this deal. That is the reason why there needs to be more transparency, more accountability on the part of government, and outreach with all sections and all stakeholders on such an important issue of aid diplomacy, particular infrastructure, which has become such an important part of foreign policy discourse in the recent years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anurag Z, for addressing these questions. And yes, we have almost come to the end of this discussion session on MCC debate. And I would like to express my thankful words to all the panelists for putting your insightful presentations and views on MCC debate. And I would also like to thank NIICE Nepal for having me here as a moderator. And I would also like to thank all our distinguished guests, experts, scholars, participants, and Facebook audiences for being participated in this discussion forum. I hope this discussion would give a way out to the MCC debate. And thank you so much.